Picture this. Your dog finishes his walk, does his business in the grass, and then, before you can even reach for the bag, turns around and eats it. Not sniffs it, not investigates it, eats it, calmly, like it's breakfast. You freeze, you gag a little, and then the questions start stacking up in your head. Is he sick? Is he missing something in his diet? Is this normal, or is something wrong with my dog? Most owners jump straight to the same explanation. He must be starving for nutrients. Add an enzyme supplement, switch the food. Problem solved, right? For a long time, that's exactly what people believed. Poop eating, or coprophagia, got treated like a symptom, a deficiency, something broken in the dog that better kibble could fix. But that's not exactly the case. When researchers actually sat down and studied thousands of real dogs, not guesses, not internet folklore, but structured behavioral data, the nutrition theory fell apart almost immediately. Diet had nothing to do with it. Age had nothing to do with it. Even house training, which you'd expect to be different in a dog with a facies problem, turned out completely normal. So if it's not a broken gut and it's not a training failure, what is it? The answer reaches back further than your dog's food bowl. It reaches back before dogs were dogs at all, to a survival strategy so old it's still wired into the behavior of the animal sleeping on your couch right now. And here's the reassuring part before we go further. Whatever your dog is doing, it almost certainly isn't a sign that you're failing him. In most cases, it's not medical. It's not defiance. It's something closer to instinct running exactly as designed. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this behavior exists, what it says about your dog's inner wiring, and why one very simple, very old idea explains almost all of it. So where did this behavior actually come from? The most detailed answer comes from Dr. Benjamin Hart, a veterinary behaviorist at the University of California, Davis, who led a large-scale study published in 2018 in the journal Veterinary Medicine and Science. Hart's team surveyed thousands of dog owners across 2 separate studies, gathering real behavioral data instead of relying on assumptions. What they found upended the old nutrition theory almost completely. Roughly 16% of dogs qualified as frequent stool eaters, meaning they'd been caught doing it 6 or more times. And when researchers looked for a link to diet, they found none. No connection to age either. Coprophagic dogs weren't undernourished, and they weren't picky. If anything, they were often described by their owners as simply enthusiastic, greedy eaters, dogs who treat most things in the world as potentially food. Here's the plain language version. Your dog's stomach isn't crying out for help. His instincts are just running a program older than domestication itself. That program, Hart proposes, traces back to wolves, specifically to denning behavior. Wolves don't defecate near their den. It attracts predators and, more importantly, it creates a parasite risk. Certain intestinal parasites lay eggs in fresh feces, but those eggs don't become infective right away. They need 1 to 2 days to develop. So, an animal that cleans up fresh waste within that short window before it becomes dangerous is actually doing something protective, not disgusting, defensive. That's the emotional pivot here. What looks like a gross-out habit may actually be an ancient hygiene instinct, one that once helped keep a den and a litter of vulnerable pups safer from disease. Your dog isn't a wolf curled up in a den anymore. He's curled up on your rug. But some of that old software is still running quietly underneath the surface, even when the original reason for running it disappeared thousands of years ago. And that raises a stranger question. If this behavior is ancient and protective, why does it show up so unevenly? Why do some dogs do it constantly and others never touch it at all? That's where the story gets more personal. Here's where it gets more specific to your own dog. Hart's data revealed something curious about timing. Coprophagic dogs strongly preferred stools that were 1 to 2 days old, almost never fresher, almost never much older. That window lines up almost exactly with how long it takes certain parasite eggs to become infective, which means this isn't random. Your dog's instincts, if he does this, appear to be tracking a threat window that science only fully mapped out in a lab. That's not a gross habit, that's a hygiene reflex with impeccable timing. There's another layer worth knowing, and it starts before your dog ever came home with you. Every puppy owner has watched a nursing mother clean her litter, and part of that cleaning, veterinary behaviorists explain, involves ingesting the puppy's waste to keep the den spotless and scent-free from predators. It's maternal, protective, unremarkable to her. Puppies raised around that behavior, some researchers believe, may simply absorb it as normal, not learned exactly, but never unlearned either. And then there's the piece that hits closer to home for a lot of owners: environment. Hart's survey found dogs were more likely to develop the habit in multi-dog households where waste sits around longer and gets noticed by more than one nose. Stress and confinement have also been linked, in general veterinary behavior literature, to increased coprophagia. Dogs in kennels or shelters with less enrichment and more anxiety engage in it more often than dogs in calm, stimulating homes. So if your dog does this, it isn't a verdict on you as an owner. It's rarely defiance, rarely a medical crisis, and rarely a nutrition failure. Most of the time, it's some combination of ancient instinct, denning memory, and environment, layered on top of a dog who processes the world mouth first, the way dogs have always done. That doesn't mean you have to accept it happily. It's completely fair to want it to stop, and simple management, quick cleanup, more enrichment, less unsupervised yard time, resolves it for most dogs. But it does mean you can stop reading it as something broken in him. It was never really about the food bowl. It was about a den that no longer exists and instincts that never got the memo.
So here's the whole picture compressed into one idea. What looks like one of the strangest, most stomach-turning things your dog does is, underneath it all, an old defense system. One built for a den, a litter, and a world full of parasites that no longer threatens him the way it once did. That's not weakness. That's not a broken dog. That's not you failing at ownership. That's an animal running inherited software with startling precision, timing his behavior to a biological window most humans have never even heard of. You don't have to love it. You're allowed to still find it unpleasant and still work on training it away. But the next time it happens, you don't have to spiral into worry about what's wrong with him. You can recognize it for what the research actually shows it usually is: instinct, not illness. History, not defiance. Your dog isn't a mystery you're failing to solve. He's a very old story still playing out in a body that lives in your home now instead of a den in the wild. And understanding that story doesn't just explain his behavior. It gives you one more small way to see him clearly, patience intact, judgment set aside. So here's a question for the comments. Was this the first time you've heard the real reason behind this behavior, or did you already suspect it wasn't about food? Until next time, stay curious about the dog in front of you.